and I am hopeful that you all can see my Watermark landing page. Today's intention is to be very specific about learning outcomes. And I'm going to use the Gen Ed program as my pretend academic program. Okay. Robin, Tom, thank you. Let me see who else is with us.
Tim, on the check-in, what's the program? Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Math?
It's, oh, for you? Oh, when you're logging into Watermark, you mean, or?
Event sign-in.
Oh, that Bernardo's gonna have to help us with. You could probably use math.
Are you an adjunct? What school? Remote program?
Yeah. Okay, I've heard that you can hear me somewhat, but the volume is not great. How does this sound? Is this, you guys online, give me some thumbs up. I've got just a few bodies in the room with me, so I want to make sure Tom said thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to proceed with Tom's approval. Today, we are going to spend as much time as you all need, so this can be brief or this can be lengthy. What I wanted to share with you are some reminders. I know, Tom, you and I have an ongoing discussion about appropriate learning outcomes, but as a reminder of how to find our Watermark login, I know those of you who are fluent in this, I hope that my screen has changed and is now showing you the college intranet landing page. At the very bottom of the college intranet landing page is the Watermark link. You do not need a new password, ideally. If you click on it and it gives you a hard time, send me an email and I'll make sure you are reset immediately following this discussion. But it should bring you to some sense of a home page. Now, most of you will not see the left-hand navigation that I see. Some of you may have administrative privileges, but this tool does a lot of other things. Today, we are really only going to focus on your program's 24-25 academic program assessment plan. My hope is that—
Could you please share the screen?
Oops.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the check-in I needed. Thank you. All right. Do you see the 3 bars of projects in progress?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Robin. I appreciate that. I am hopeful that on your homepage for your program, you see a bar that represents, or a purple link that represents 24-25 academic program assessment plans. That is for this current year that we are in. And by clicking on that assessment plan, I am hoping that you see a homepage. Oops, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I want to see if I can get it to display what you all should see. But it is not yet. I wanted the program to land on a landing page that you all would see rather than what I am seeing. So forgive me for a second. I'm going to bounce around just for a second. I come into, oh, I don't want to jump into plans. I want to pretend that my Gen Ed assessment plan, let me enter the program. Perhaps should land you on some page like this. Are you all seeing something that resembles a program on the left-hand side with some left navigation? I will assume if I don't hear from you, you are seeing something like this. How about I proceed that way? I will assume that silence means we're on board. Karen will interrupt me if I'm not. I'm counting on Karen. I still have some. Karen's not in here quite yet. You should see biotech, Karen, in your name. This is the home page of the program. Remember, on the left-hand side is the navigation that usually gets us where we want within Watermark. I have a bunch of sort of miscellaneous junk in here because of the different things that I am working on, the projects. The program information is usually a sufficient sort of summary starting page, which may have some sense of a mission statement. The mission statement hopefully is represented of a purpose statement maybe. I haven't spent a lot of time on mission statements because it's sort of let's put something in here that basically explains why do we have, in this case, a gen ed program. And of course, if it was up to me, there would be paragraphs and paragraphs here. Is Karen all right? So did I lose you? Let me see your screen, Karen.
Okay.
You good? That's it. That's it. And click on enter program in the purple. So remember, the navigation of this system is that it likes the color purple. So usually anything in bold or that has any text that is purple will let you click on it. Gail, I'm assuming you weren't raising your hand, but just moving some stuff around in your screen. And speak up if I'm losing any of you. Today, I wanted to spend most of our time on these learning outcomes for your program. I am hopeful that when you are on your homepage and you have clicked program information on the left-hand side, so that's the purple bar that's lit up right now, you'll see some sense of a mission statement, but just below mission statement, you will see some outcomes listed. If you don't see anything under learning outcomes, we will manage the outcomes in a big purple button on the right. But my other hope is that we have some sort of standardization of title. So what I've tried to do for most programs is use this acronym SLO, and then a number, and then a colon with no spaces. SLO, of course, standing for Student Learning Outcome 1, colon, and then a title, civic engagement. As we all know, and we are tired of hearing about, there are 6 core competencies for our gen ed program. So I showed those all here. Now, if you have more than 4 learning outcomes, the system will hide some from you. That's a little hint that when you get too much over 4, maybe you've got too many things that you're measuring. 4 is kind of not a magic number, but it's a suggestion. So on the lower right-hand corner, there's a button to view all outcomes. We'll try and keep up with the chat too. So if you originally land on this page and you don't see all your outcomes, don't panic. But if you come down to the right and you see a view more or view all, you can click that and it should display all of the learning outcomes. Now, the key pieces I want to work with this group on today are simplicity. I don't want our learning outcomes to get too complicated. Learning outcomes should be understandable by the students themselves, right? And certainly all of our faculty. I should be able to look at Karen Neal's biotech learning outcomes and make some sense of them. I should be able to do the same for math. Certainly I should do for Med Lab, and for our other colleagues who are on the phone. We should be able to read these without getting confused. So simplicity is my first request. We have a lot of language in these learning outcomes for gen ed, but we don't have a lot of control over these. These are prescribed to us by the state and the BCCS. So that's my excuse for having a little bit longer learning outcome. I'd like to try to say that a learning outcome in the simplicity vein should probably not be longer than a sentence, and not a run-on sentence ideally, because the simplicity in this case to me is connected to specificity. So if we are being specific and simple, we should have a relatively short learning outcome here. This is where I'm going to do a little bit of audience engagement. Instead of me just showing you my screen, I'm going to call on Karen Neal because she's sitting right in front of me, and that's the punishment you get for coming to class. But then I'm going to call on Robin because I know Robin's got some business ones. Karen, how many learning outcomes are there right now for biotech? Do we have any yet?
I have 2 gen ed
Two, that's right. We put scientific literacy
professional readiness.
and professional readiness. So we loaned Karen 2 learning outcomes to have something in her page before we created. How many do you think we're going to end up with?
That's what I was just looking at.
Trying to see.
I'm gonna go with the magic number that you said, which was
4. So when I've had meetings with program heads and they've said, Tim, I inherited a program and there were no learning outcomes at all in the program. What I did my screen change for those of you on Zoom to back to the faculty learning outcomes website? If somebody says to me, I have no idea what to do in terms of a learning outcome, I said, let's go take a look at the college catalog just to see in case. So let's use Karen's program as an example. And I'm pretty sure, I'm hoping the screen is shifting for all of you online. I'm now on the programs landing page. And let's see what it says about biotech, if it is in our catalog. Is it yet? Maybe I shouldn't have assumed that. It's under STEM, right?
it's in the catalog.
It's under STEM.
Yep.
And it is listed where? I don't see
Associates
it.
of Science. It's right above Career Studies Certificate.
There. Biotech lab major. So I am going to take a peek at this catalog, and unfortunately, all it's doing is listing the curriculum. There is not a description of much in the catalog, right? I was hoping to find something like this, for example. Since James is in the room, I'm going to pick on James. Let's see in the mathematics major that we have a purpose to the program, right? So this may be the mission statement for the math program, maybe, that's debatable. In the math major, what I am looking for is some language here. And for those of you who are on this call, we are, for the 25-26 academic catalogs, going to create a section that says student learning outcomes. And in the 25-26 catalog, we are going to list 1, 2, 3, 4, for Karen's example, in biotech, what the 4 student learning outcomes that are written simply, and written with specificity, so that students can see them right up front when they're signing up for their classes. So in the math—
Will they be course specific or program specific? Sorry.
Yeah, good question, Robin. Thank you for interrupting. Program level outcomes. Program level outcomes. So ideally, I don't want more than 6 or 7 of these. I will defer to faculty if Karen says, Tim, I've got 8 and I need to list all 8. I will defer to you because you're the expert in the content of the program. And I'll say, if you are expecting your students to be able to know and demonstrate 8 things before they leave the program, you're the expert in that, not me. You're going to ask me a question, Karen. You're having some thoughts.
No, go ahead.
All right. I don't see clearly listed in the math major in the catalog, which again is okay, what the math faculty as a floor expect their students to be able to do. Now I'm seeing some things in here about transfer related admissions requirements, right? So I would probably go to somebody like James and say, across the program, across the curriculum, across these classes that are listed, and granted, a number of them are gen ed specific, but if we were to take a look at the math level courses, can we together come up with 3, 4, 5 bits of knowledge or bits of learning that are touched on in at least 1 or 2 of these classes? James might say, well, Tim, we do math theory in 3 classes. And I'd say, all right, what are the basic principles of math theory? I'd say, well, you have to be able to blah, 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 blah. That's where I lose my card as a faculty member who knows anything specific because I'm a generalist. So now maybe Tom and I could have some fun debates, right? But even on our calls, Tom, I said, I've got to defer to you to what's being taught. So Robin, your question about course versus program, the course outcomes, I think, should heavily influence the program outcomes. outcomes, right? Because if you're teaching at the course something that is not connected at all to the program, that might be a conversation. Now, the program levels should not capture all of the courses, of course, but the courses should have some say on what we're trying to measure at the program level. And I have to defer to you all to tell me, is this something we do regularly? Do we regularly ask students about their ability to add? That's so bottom level, Tim, we're above that. That's high school or that's elementary school. James would say, we expect some base level of calculus. They should know what sine, cosine, tangent means. Okay, well, where do we ask them that? Where do we teach them that? James says, well, we teach them that in these 5 courses. So that might be a starting point for this conversation. But I wanted to show you all the catalog for 2 reasons. One, it's my go-to sort of source of what is being taught. And B, we are evolving it for next year to be very explicit with, here are my learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes that are going to go in the catalog are going to come from Watermark. So that's why I want to spend this year as much as possible making sure that you all as faculty are comfortable with the language that we've put in Watermark, because that's going to be our source of information for the catalog for next year. So we've got time. There's no urgency here. However, the catalog for the next year begins to be built in the spring, right? So we can have this conversation pretty much all fall, but that as we get into March and April of spring, we should be pretty confident that the words we've chosen, we are comfortable with sharing in a public way.
Tim, I think actually edits for the catalog for next year do like January-ish.
Oh, that early?
The schedule goes live
In April or something.
in April.
Yeah, all right. So
it
we don't have
makes
quite
sense.
as much time. So we do have this fall. We do have, well, and fall is 2.5 more months, I guess, if we look at it that way.
Not believe today's the first day of October.
First day of October. But again, I'm not going anywhere and I'm going to help everybody. Again, we're not creating from scratch. Karen is, but most of us are not. And I would also say that we are not the only school in America to teach biotechnology. That's a wild guess. Yeah. And I would also guess that other institutions probably have something about their learning outcomes online.
Sure, I
So we can borrow and cite appropriately, I would suppose. I am not asking Karen to create these from blank. Let me pause before we do a deeper dive just to see if I've lost anybody or if there are any observations as to where we are right now. Okay, so let's say for the sake of editing, I would like to make some tweaks to these learning outcomes. I hope, can you all see my learning outcomes page again in Watermark, folks online? Yep, all right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So again, before I dive into learning outcomes, let me remind you, I touched base very briefly on success outcomes. These are tangential, maybe if I can use a math term appropriately, to learning outcomes. Success outcomes are something that usually they're connected to learning outcomes. This example, very, very grotesquely, I should say, is just increase enrollment. A success outcome is something that is easy to count. We want more students to enroll. But it doesn't really speak directly to learning. Maybe if we were to talk about retention or completion, students won't graduate if they don't know what we want them to know, we hope, right? Because we're passing them in grades, we're giving them tests. So that's sort of connected to learning. But it's not a direct measure of their learning, right? It's more of a sits on the side. I have not emphasized this at all. I have only said if you're interested and you want to play around with it, I will welcome it and we can take a look at it together. I wanted to show you that it is there in case there's interest in trying it out. There is no expectation that we do anything with success outcomes, but that is sort of a 2-3 year out plan perhaps. What I really want to do is today spend our time on learning outcomes to make sure we're comfortable with this language. So to make edits, rather than the manage measures buttons that are under each learning outcome, I want to come back to the top. Oh, was there a chat I missed? Yes, exactly, Gail. How well did the students do? And that, you could almost make that argument, Gail, that scores on qualifying exams or licensing exams, those are very relevant, I might say, to learning, right? Because the licensing exam covers the content that you prepared them for. But a success outcome could be to increase the score, right? We want to go from 90 to 100, or we want to go from 80 to 90 or something like that. But yes, that licensing exams are a great way to do this. So I clicked the purple button that said manage outcomes. So from, again, the program information page, adjacent next to the outcomes is manage outcomes. So that takes us to a page, I hope, for you that looks something like this. Karen will see the 2 gen eds. I see the 6 gen eds that are all part of the program. And notice there's no year connected to this. I'm not talking about just this year. I'm talking about the program. Now, outcomes can change over time, right? We can modify these and add or subtract based on how our curriculum is changing. But if the curriculum is mostly set, and we have agreed that there is a floor, a minimum expectation of 3 to 5 things that we expect the students to know, but then also be able to demonstrate. Robin, your question about courses is again relevant because we should create program learning outcomes with some sense in our head of what courses are teaching this content and then how we anticipate measuring that. That's the deep dive in the next one of these sessions where we'll go into curriculum maps. We'll go explain how course level assignments gets us to learning outcomes. But today is just how good are we feeling about our learning outcomes. Let's make sure that we're comfortable with them and that we're putting them in the catalog. So in this view, again, we have the ability to, anytime you see a pencil or 3 dots in Watermark, it gives you opportunities to change things. So the pencil next to the top one is, what do I even want to call these things? Again, that's pretty basic. Usually it's just the program name, learning outcomes. Biotech, program learning outcomes, or something, student learning outcomes. I think you can call those to some extent whatever you would like. Again, I want to reiterate the hope that we have. It's not an expectation, but it makes life easier on the reporting side. Some standardization of title. SLO1 colon dissection. SLO2 colon lab prep. SLO3, et cetera, et cetera. The title helps you when you're looking back at these, say, yeah, what am I supposed to be looking at? In this case, I'm looking at civic engagement. And then in the outcome, I go in to try to define what it is as simply and as specifically as possible. Now, a real outcome for learning, probably this degree graduates will demonstrate. That might be more of a success outcome. I think that's sort of debatable in this world, that we have the ability to add extra things, but adding second sentences to learning outcomes sometimes gives me a little bit of heartburn, because usually a second sentence is shifting to something else. But if a second sentence is just used to get more specific with the first sentence, okay, so be it. We can have a few sentences in learning outcomes. But again, my hope with this exercise is that we're keeping it simple, we're keeping it specific. And then the third sort of part of that is it measurable? Can we actually measure what we say we care about? And civic engagement is a tricky one. Can we measure someone's ability to contribute to civic life and well-being?
I seriously doubt it.
Right? How would we measure that? We could ask them as an indirect measure, James, how able are you to contribute? And James would say, I'm incredibly able to. Well, I would say, based on what? Well, because Tim, I took this class and you taught me how to register to vote and blah, 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 blah. So to some extent, we want to connect back James's ability to answer that question with what we taught. But yes, that is a very, as Tom pointed out accurately, I agree, that is a tricky one to measure. And as Tom and I have had conversations about some of the things we're trying to teach in liberal arts, some of those things are complicated. And so I, again, defer to my faculty colleagues to say, Tim, this is how I would measure them. I ask them to write a paper. I ask them to give a presentation. I have 10 questions on a quiz or on a final that expects them to show that knowledge clearly. But if Tom's point is well taken and I say, you know what, I think I need to edit this learning outcome. Those 3 dots to the right will allow me to make changes to this particular outcome. Now, what Watermark asks us to do is determine between an edit and a revision. When you edit it, it's, oops, I put an extra space in there, or, oh, I misspelled the word responsibility. The edit is just a minor tweak to, I don't like the word civic, I'm gonna use civil or something. Those are, and maybe that's a bigger one, but those are meant to be just little tweaks, little adjustments. A revise is, I think I'm going at this wrong, or I don't think we need to include national and global because we're a community college, right? And let's set our sights on our local. That matters so much more to us than global, for example, right? So to me, that would be a revision to this because we're taking components out. Archive is also an option if, you know what, Tim, we don't even teach civic engagement at all anymore. We used to, and we lost our one professor who taught it. So I don't want to hold on to that anymore because we've taken classes out and we've moved it. You can archive it without deleting it, and it just pulls it out, but it leaves it in a history to say, at one point as a college, we did care about civic engagement and civic learning. So if we were to click on revise, it leaves the left-hand window alone, but it gives us a right-hand window with the same sort of boxes where it just was displayed over here, with the ability to modify the title, the ability to modify the description. And again, it tries to keep you short. 1,000 characters is still a lot, but trying to limit how much you're actually typing there. Tags, when I met one-on-one with a lot of you, I sort of put this as an optional idea. Tags is a way to sort of categorize what you're trying to do with a Bloom taxonomy word. What is the essential bit of knowledge or skill that I'm trying to get at here? Civic engagement probably isn't about any of these. Understand isn't a great word. You can create your own tag. The idea here is it's a feature that's available that I don't really promote, but I show you in case you're curious or in case you'd like to play with it. You can say, I've got a couple of things where I'm really focusing on creation. I really want them to create a new species with the goop that I give them in the lab or something. But that's optional, not necessary. And then lastly is if you wanted to leave yourself any breadcrumbs. Yeah, Tim suggested in a meeting in September, October that I add these 3 words. So that's also sort of just a way to capture and track progress or things that we might be modifying as we move along. And then I would just create the revision and it would update the learning outcome. Let me pause here to see if I skipped over something too quickly or if anybody wants to back up. Karen, are you good? What's your thoughts right now?
I was actually digging in my email to see if I had the
the proposal originally for the program?
yes, to
'Cause we
find
would've-
some
yeah.
learning outcomes. I found some stuff, but not enough. For like that, are there, like mine is already populated. What if I want an additional gen ed
Yeah.
requirement?
So you want to add, so we're back into the manage outcomes. If we have 6 and we want 7, this create new outcome,
New one,
right?
right?
Instead of popping up to the right, it gives us a pop-up in the middle with the same sort of stuff in it. Again, my hope is that you would say SLO blah. Is that what you were asking or something else?
Oh, so there's not, like, I can't go in and choose those already populated ones from, like,
From a resource or a bank or something like that.
Yeah.
So the gen ed ones, yes, we can move gen eds over. And for people who teach transfer, my hope was that we would evolve to that eventually. That a program like math, which is designed for transfer, we would say we've got 4 outcomes that are very specific to math. And we're gonna put quantitative literacy in that too.
Because two of the gen eds.
So we tried to do that a little bit. And Robin, again, if you're thinking about business being primarily a transfer program, right? I would think professional readiness maybe would be useful, maybe quant, right? If some of the econ classes are really leaning into spreadsheeting or ability to analyze data, maybe critical thinking, right? So again, I would defer to the program head to say, back to the courses, yes, I know we teach critical thinking in the following ways. Yes, I know we teach math and econ, and we can measure those components at different points in our curriculum. So we're gonna get, the curriculum map session is gonna be a little more detailed into connecting courses to the learning outcomes. I just wanted this to be first with, let's make sure our learning outcomes sound measurable, simple, specific. If we get those 3 things done, I think that's our floor. And we build on that with the curriculum map, we'll build on that with the data analysis and all the future sessions that I'm gonna offer that we're gonna do together. But today was just, let's make sure we've got something, which we do. All the programs have something. But now I want it to be let's refine it and improve it and make it easier to measure, simplify it if we can, but be as specific as possible. So in terms of the logistics, I don't really have a lot other steps today to share with everybody unless there are, because I don't want to get into managing measures yet. That's our next sort of deep dive when we think about going into actual classes and assignments. That's where we'll go in the future. Today, it was just, I wanted to ground us with, do we have a good start in terms of program heads, again, deferring to the faculty to say, yes, those outcomes look good, they're accurate, I know how we can measure them, and we'll do the deeper dive later this fall into exactly how we do all that. Comments, questions? Robin, how are you feeling at this point?
I'm frustrated that some of my transfer classes have like 20 different objectives
Yes.
that the VCCS has put in place.
Yes.
But we'll get through it.
And in some ways, that's good because you get to pick and choose, right? You have more choices. It's hard if they expect you to know how to measure every single one of those 20, right? And maybe there are themes across them. That's where I could help you maybe. Like we could put a bunch of those into a spreadsheet and say, all right, let's find some things that are similar.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, happy to help. Gail, how are you doing with this stuff? I know some of your things are easier to measure than others.
Mostly I'm doing just fine. I'm comfortable in this realm, as you know.
I do know.
However, you raise a question that's got my mind stirring.
Okay.
We have those categories, but then we also evaluate them in 6 different disciplines concurrently, which brings to mind the possibility of a cube rather than a 2-dimensional graph.
Wow, Gail. Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to come to terms with that.
That would be fun. I think that's pushing the boundaries of my knowledge of learning outcomes, but I would be happy to figure that out with you. It's like depth. You're adding, well, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
Next week, I've got a self-study due this week.
All right. Height, width, and depth. That'd be fun. Talk about that. And Yvonne, we haven't met. I know you're figuring out the opticianry, right?
Yes. Hello. Nice to meet you. I have just walked into this for the very first time today and kind of following along. I think I'm probably going to schedule some time to meet with you outside of this.
Yeah.
Just make sure that I have an understanding of what exactly is it I'm supposed to be doing with this thing.
Sure. Were you able to follow along in terms of you could pull the program up and see all this stuff?
Yes.
That was there?
Yes.
Okay. There are some programs, and maybe I can't remember where we were with opticianry, but there were some that had a decent roadmap. But you and I will look at that, and your fresh eyes will be great, because I think you'll ask some good questions and say, well, why did we do that, or how did we align that?
Yes.
But yes, please ping me whenever your schedule permits, and we'll set up a walkthrough together on Zoom or Teams or something.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great to meet you. Thanks for joining.
Nice to meet you.
James, how are you with your math outcomes? Good. Doing all right? And Miss Karen, we can follow up and have some.
I think we're gonna need to,
Yeah,
because I'm running into that, your comment about the civic engagement and some of these other things, that are difficult to measure,
yes,
but they are huge learning objectives.
right. I don't want to overcomplicate them.
Right.
So
You're talking to the wrong person.
in some ways,
I'm gonna
in some-
overthink
but that's where I love to
heck out
bring
of it.
sort of my healthy ignorance. I know very little about eyeballs. Actually, I have a great story for that. I'll tell Yvonne when we meet. I had my eyes exam. I'm wearing glasses for the first time in 50 some years, but I don't know much about these things. So I sort of bring this healthy ignorance like, well, if I don't really understand the difference between a retina and an eyelash, how do you explain it to students? Or how do you measure that they can tell you what it is? Like, oh yeah, well, they do that this way. Or we've got something that really clearly explains it here. And that's where I sort of try to help you explain to me.
But we're looking at the eye for the first time.
Well, true.
So
But-
that makes.
But we're not
that
alone
adds
in
a
that.
dimension to
Yeah,
that,
it
that
does.
is,
It does. And that's where, again, if there's nothing internal, let's go external. Let's take a look at VCU's stuff or UVA or William and Mary, whoever has a biotech program. Let's go borrow from them. But that was what I wanted to accomplish today. I know, save you a little, oh, and Tom came back. I saw Tom drop. I wasn't sure if he, Tom and I have had some really fun conversations about measuring liberal arts concepts. And what do we, as an institution who offers liberal arts in order to get students prepared to transfer, how should we measure that floor? And I think Tom and I have had some fun debates because it's, well, we teach them this and we, want to measure that. And it's almost as complicated as the sciences, but in a different
In
way.
a different way,
right?
absolutely.
How do you measure beauty? How do you measure love, right? How do you measure these really fun things to say, well, I have indicators of it, but what do we collect from the students? So, Tom, I'm glad you rejoined. Is there anything, I'm basically sort of wrapping up. I think we've kind of covered what I wanted to cover. Is there anything you'd like to see while you're?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
Do we need to have measures in place by the end of fall semester or just definitions?
I want to have for sure the definitions clean. My next session that I'm going to offer, we are going to get into the measures a little bit more. So I think we can say the measures don't have to be perfect for the catalog, but I want the wording to be as close as possible to perfect, or at least
Because the measurements are going to be really tricky given the nature of my program.
absolutely,
But okay.
Absolutely, I agree. But you and I will talk more about that. But I want you to feel good with the learning outcomes first, and we should have that by the end of fall.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want an idea of the deadlines and stuff. Okay, thanks.
That's it. For sure, outcomes, and then we'll talk about measures, but we'll spend the spring talking more about them too. And I may rerun some of these sessions, of course, if useful. Oh, and I will also put in, I was playing around, of course, YouTube has a ton of, stuff. And I will make sure that these resources are available. This is a brief 14-minute, and I've watched it and then was rewatching it again today. Really nice summary of the difference between, particularly Robin's question, course learning outcomes and program learning outcomes. And it gives some examples that I don't completely agree with, but it did a nice job. My former colleagues at the University of Hawaii at Manoa have a very comprehensive research-based bunch of resources for us. So they do a lot of explanation of things. So this is, again, is another resource that I will leave with you. And Penn State also has some really thoughtful and helpful considerations of program learning outcomes. So you don't just hear it from my mouth, but you can look at these other resources and say, oh, like Karen and I was saying, I don't want to rewrite this because it's written well somewhere else, but I'll put these links with some of the resources that I have available through CEDL, so that when we review this, I mean, the faculty hub, right? So this session will be the recordings, I'll chunk them out, and so you don't have to digest 45 minutes of it, and useful links to help when you have time to think through this stuff. But other than that, that's all I got. So thank you for your time. And as long as you got the credit that you needed for whatever PBO tracking we've got, I think we're good. I'll hang out if anybody has questions or anything else for me, but other than that, thanks.